Okay, everyone, let's get started again. I'm going to be picking stuff up off the podium. So for those of you who need CEs, please make sure that you got scanned into this and that obviously you get scanned out too. I know this is a little confusing with the sessions, but that's what the barcodes are for. And each of these sessions are separate sessions. So please just make sure, because we want to make sure you all get the CEs. So, Pioneer Network partners with a lot of organizations, and what we really look for are like-minded organizations that share our values and share our principles. And one of those organizations that I've had the pleasure to work with for a number of years, and that's based here in Denver, Colorado, is Wish of a Lifetime. So Jared Bloomfield is with us today, and he's going to tell you a little bit about Wish of a Lifetime. And this is an organization that you need to get involved with. So Jared, please join me.
Thanks, Penny. Okay, I got mic'd up, so I think I can put this down. Amazing. Thank you, Penny, so much. Thank you for having us. My name is Jared Bloomfield. I am our National Field Director at Wish of a Lifetime. As Penny had alluded to, we've been working with Pioneer Network for many years and really excited to be in front of you all here today. So Wish of a Lifetime grants wishes to seniors over 65. We're actually based in Denver, here on 17th and Grant, so it's a very easy walk over this morning, but we've been granting wishes since 2008. And before we talk about what we do and how we want you to get involved, I wanted to take a step back and talk about why we do what we do. So we can go to the next slide here. I guess we can even do this, can't we? Amazing. So why does Wish of a Lifetime grant wishes? We grant wishes to shift the way society views and values older adults. That's really different than like a Make-A-Wish model or other models you'd see around wish granting. We think it's really important to honor older adults, tell their stories, and celebrate their legacies. And through a wish experience, we're able to do that, and we've done that 2,200 times since 2008. Thank you. So a big reason why we grant wishes is to tell stories, especially to younger generations. And I've talked to a lot of you all through the years about the importance around bringing these incredibly special stories to light so that society, the whole country, can see what we all know in this room, how incredibly special older adults are. So before I talk about very briefly what we do and how you can get involved, I wanted to talk about why we're here. Wish of a Lifetime has been around since 2008, but up until 2020, we granted about as many wishes as we possibly could. But as a small nonprofit organization, there were limitations. Flash forward to August of 2020, we were lucky enough to become a charitable affiliate of AARP. And what that's allowed us to do is to expand our message and mission nationwide. We're actually looking for wishes. And so that's why we're here today. Penny, thank you so much for allowing us to be in front of you all and providing like a really cool opportunity to be involved. So, wishes. What do we do specifically? The wishes that we grant absolutely vary from as simple as a special dinner out with family for an older adult that hasn't been able to engage with their family for many years due to COVID or due to other life circumstances, to as complicated as sending a Vietnam veteran to Washington, D.C. to be honored for their service, sending a Holocaust survivor to Israel. We reunited 3 women that were all centenarians, 103, 107, and 110. Check out our website for more information on that. So the wishes can be really complicated. They can be really, really simple. But what we're looking for is an experience that has a deep and meaningful connection to an older adult that has given back a lot in their life. So as I'm describing that, who has somebody in mind in their life or in their community that might be a candidate for a program like this? If you could raise your hand. Pretty good. About a third, which is pretty amazing. So we have 4 different categories of wishes, and I would urge you to go on our website to learn more. But we grant a wide variety of wishes all across the United States, really looking specifically now post-COVID to reconnect people with loved ones. We also honor veterans. We provide people an opportunity to do something that they've never done before. And we provide somebody an opportunity to be reconnected with a passion in their life. And so whether it's skydiving for the 92-year-old older adult that has always wanted to go skydiving, or we had a 99-year-old Holocaust survivor who felt like her last adventure needed to be a hot air balloon. She felt like she had done everything except for going on a hot air balloon. We had a 103-year-old woman, for any baseball fans out there, who threw out the first pitch at a Minnesota Twins game, which for me is my absolute wish of a lifetime. So we're in an incredible spot thanks to AARP, and now we're in front of you all where we're looking for wishes. We're able to grant next year probably double the amount of wishes that we granted in 2019. But what's been really difficult for us is we're not a national brand yet, and we know that connections are capital. And so I know a lot of people in this room have had great experiences with us in the past, and our hope is to be able to spread the word and make it as easy as possible for you to be involved in our program and bring it back to your communities. Wish of a Lifetime is an incredibly free resource. It's not Publishers Clearinghouse. We grant a lot more wishes than we don't. That's incredibly important. And we have a wonderful window here, especially post-COVID, to bring light, joy, and spread legacy throughout our senior communities throughout the United States. So without further ado, I want everybody to look at the wall over here. We have my colleague, Caitlin Shepard and Perry Cooper. Yeah, that's nice. Very nice. So we've come armed today. We just started a chat in this app, which Joan promised me would be very active, and it really is. What do we see, 17,000 posts, comments? Pretty amazing. So we have 2 different ways for you to get involved. The first way is over by Caitlin and Perry. That's where I'm going to be. We have simplified our application. Typically, our application takes about 45 minutes to fill out. But special for you all today, we've made this application only 3 questions. So come over, grab an application, learn more about Wish of a Lifetime. If you want to fill it out and leave it here, we'll call out to your senior community probably before you even get back home. In addition, if you do have a wish in mind or want to workshop something, please use the chat. This community can be so supportive in doing good. I've seen it with Pioneer Network for years. And this is really what we want you all to do. Support each other in taking that little extra time to submit a wish to Wish of a Lifetime. It is incredibly easy. We take on the rest of the planning process, but after 2 or 3 minutes of submitting an application, you can be part of this incredible story and really change an older adult's life. So with that being said, thank you so much for the time. Please check out our application. Please check out our website. And thank you for being part of the movement.
Thank you so much, Jared. And please, 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 please think about those residents in your communities and your organizations that would love to have their experience actually happen, their wish of a lifetime, and talk to my friends today. So thank you. And now I would like to introduce our next speaker, and she has been such a friend of Pioneer Network over the years. And I'll tell you, and hopefully you'll feel the same way after you hear her too, Dr. Susan Wehry is one of those people that I could just listen to for hours. Not only is her voice the most soothing voice I think that I've heard, but she is so full of knowledge and experience, and she's so relatable. So without further ado, Dr. Susan Wehry.
Thank you so much, Penny, and thank you all for being here. I promise you won't have to listen to me for hours, but I would ask your kind attention for the next 50 minutes or so. The day she was sprung from the hospital, Mildred Maxine Cardinal, 97 years old, settled into her recliner and invited her daughter-in-law to fix lunch, put it on a couple of TV trays, pull up a chair next to her, and settle in for an afternoon of Gunsmoke. The top of the lineup for her favorite old westerns. She loved Miss Kitty, the barkeep with a heart of gold, and Matt Dillon, her unrequited love interest. And why not? Miss Kitty was fearsome, independent, strong, loving, kind, and the heart of her community. She'd help anybody, but she was no pushover. And you know, she was a lot like Maxine. Maxine was my mother, and many of you may have already met her through the generous publishing of the last story, one of the last stories she wrote in October of last year. It was my great gift and privilege to serve as one of her personal caregivers in the last 4 months of her life. And during that time, she penned something called Old Hands, which you can read on the Pioneer Network website. One night, after helping her on and off the toilet and bathing her and helping her get ready for bed, I was conducting or started our nightly ritual of massaging her back with her favorite massage lotion. She said, "Oh, that feels so good." And then she started to cry. And I said, "What's wrong?" I wondered in an instant, was she, like I, wondering how many of these moments we had left? And she said to me, "I just keep thinking of all those poor old ladies living in nursing homes who have no one to rub their backs. Please don't give up on what you do." So, Mom, this one's for you. You can rest easy, because I'm bringing your message to the people that I know will never give up. Haven't given up, won't give up, and more importantly, know what to do to get her done. So thank you so much for being here. And that's my mom, as you might guess, and my lovely wife, saying goodbye to one another after an episode of Gunsmoke, no doubt. So, truly, thank you for being here and for all you do each and every day to help secure greater well-being for everyone. So let's jump right in, and you get to work. At your table, I want you to turn to the person next to you, and I want you to think for a moment about these 3 words and decide among yourselves how they're different, how they're the same, what you think about these words, but basically, what's the difference between sympathy and why isn't it pity? What's the difference between sympathy and empathy? And what is empathy compared to compassion? You have 3 minutes, so get to it. You can do it as a learning circle, but I think you do it better in pairs. Okay, if I could ask you. I beg your pardon? Oh, do I want you to quiet him down? So, let's bring our attention back together. And, people have been asking me, what is this talk about? I said, it's about being kind. And it's not a practice random acts of kindness bumper sticker. It is about getting the trite out of kindness. It is about getting it back into our bones where it belongs. It is a talk about compassion and about how essential compassion will be to our survival. So let's make sure that we're all using language in kind of the same way. You know, language really does matter. It's been a theme in culture change from the beginning. And here's how I am going to be using the words today. When we talk about empathy, we're really talking about that human capacity to lean into the feelings of another. That's kind of what it means, right? And it's sometimes accompanied by this notion of perspective taking. Empathy is often defined as or described as being able to stand in another's shoes, being able to feel into what the other person is feeling. And interestingly, it was part of our human evolution to be able to do that, to be able to feel into another and yet recognize that their feelings were not our feelings, that there is a difference between what that person is feeling and what we're feeling, but to be able to feel into. And that is really, I think, the working definition and how I'm going to be using empathy today. It's really about sharing an experience, but it is really different than compassion. Compassion has from its roots, a Greek word, means to suffer with. It means to come alongside. But importantly, the difference about compassion is that it doesn't rest with coming alongside, suffering with, feeling it. Compassion demands action. Compassion is, thank you, Rosemary. She liked that one. And I know if I score with you that we're on the right track for this talk. Okay, this really is about fearsomeness. It is about action because compassion is being sensitized to human suffering and saying, it's not okay, and being motivated to do something about it. I've read recently a wonderful book called The Art and Science of Compassion by a person that I know, Agnes Wong, the reference is listed there. And she defines compassion, as you can see, as a sensitivity to the suffering. And note this, the suffering of self and others with a commitment to alleviating it or preventing it. And that's what this talk is about. You hear in this, these multi-dimensions. It is more than just empathy. It is empathy in action. It has the affective component. It has an awareness of the suffering in the world. It has the awareness of the suffering of others. It has an awareness of our own suffering in the face of all of it. And it says it's not okay. And the reason I keep emphasizing this is that I think compassion requires that we hurt. Compassion requires that we feel our own pain. Compassion requires that we grieve and mourn what we have been through these last 2 years and not stop there. Compassion demands that we take stock and that we say, you know, I want to relieve this, and then being ready to do so. Now, interestingly, people say, well, aren't just some people born that way? Aren't some people more compassionate than others? Probably. One needs conditions to have compassion nurtured, I suppose. But actually, compassion is an innate human capacity. We all have it. Everybody has it. And I'm going to try to prove that to you in case you think it's something that only belongs to nice people. Because it doesn't. and it is essential for our survival that not so nice people exercise their capacity for compassion too. You know, people misquote Charles Darwin all the time. Charles Darwin was not the one who said survival of the fittest. He also, by the way, didn't say survival of the kindest, but he did say in his Descent of Man in 1871, by natural selection, those animals who have figured out how to aid one another, those animals that have learned how to live in community are the ones that have survived. And they will flourish best. That was Charles Darwin. This is a very important insight because so oftentimes, particularly I think in our Western culture, we applaud this sort of individualism, this sort of up by our bootstraps, I can do anything. And Darwin said, that's great. We need a lot of I's. But we need some we's. We need to appreciate that our survival depends on our recognizing our interconnectedness and being in this together. And I'm sorry this slide didn't translate in the crossover, so it's a little hard to read. But let me just tell you that there are two key ideas here from science of the last 2 decades where neuroscientists in particular have become keenly interested in all this mindfulness and meditation and compassion talk. And there's been a real evolution, and part of the evidence for why I know that compassion is innate, or I believe that it is innate, is that if you look at the way our brains have evolved, they have evolved to allow us to take our default brains, which is primed for threats. Our default brains, our basic brain, our primitive brain, is designed to be wary. And yet, because we need social interactions, because we're essentially social beings, we need to fine-tune that sense of threat so that we can communicate and be in company with one another. So if you look at the evolution of the brain, it has actually been fine-tuned to allow us to recognize those threat signals, our fear, our anxiety, maybe even our disgust, and fine-tune it, to damp it down, to mitigate it, using a higher center of our brain. Now, we've also evolved to have a very strong sense of kinship and clanship. And I'm sorry to say that really for the last 20 years, our body politic has used that capacity to divide us. To say us and them, they and us. And we've been doing a lot of othering. And that othering is part of what we need to undo, or to simply recognize that the we includes like the whole human race. And what I see in COVID is this opportunity to recognize our global interconnectedness. I mean, how could we not recognize it? So that sense of kinship and clanship, which is built into our brains, we need to say, okay, I recognize that I'm the same as some and different from others, but at the end of the day, what I really gravitate towards is our common humanity. And so that self-other differentiation that we use in empathy, we rise above when we get to compassion, right? And so we recognize that there is benefit for we. We also know from evolutionary psychology that if you look at the motivating, there was sort of like 3 motivating centers in the brain. There's the threat system, which is the old fight or flight that you remember. There's the drive and reward that lights up other parts of our brain, little hits of dopamine, you hear about it all the time. It's part of what makes social media kind of addicting, because it just keeps popping off that dopamine. It's one of our motivators. And then we have our affiliative and bonding system. And they are all, from the brain's point of view, necessary. One is not better than the other. One is not more important than the other. But what has happened to us, I think, in the last, pick your favorite starting point, I usually start with Bush v. Gore, but that is my age showing itself. And it just kind of went downhill from there. Okay, but yeah, take your starting point. We can probably all agree that there are things that are wrong. Maybe we won't agree on what's the worst among them. But wherever you start from, I think that what we can agree on is that we have a great opportunity now with things so upside down to use this breaking open to do things better. Now, if science doesn't move you, it does move me. But if science doesn't move you, if you don't care whether we have 3 motivation centers in the brain, if you don't care about dopamine, let me tell you the other source of our wisdom and knowledge about this, why it's good to be kind, why the golden rule works. Wisdom traditions have been telling us for thousands and thousands of years that the golden rule is important. What's kind of interesting to me about the golden rule is the various ways it's been said, though. This particular quote, by the way, is from Karen Armstrong, who's sort of a historian on world religions. And she looks at all of them and she says, check this out. Every major religion has some version of the do unto others as you would have them do unto you. First that she found, and so I've quoted here, comes from Confucius, who said it a little differently. And I liked this way that it was said. The Zhang Shu. Don't do anything to anybody that you wouldn't want them to do to you. Another version of that, don't do anything to anybody which if somebody did it to you would hurt. Don't do anything that you wouldn't want somebody to do back. And Confucius said one word, sums this all up. The basis of all good conduct is loving kindness. Now, here's a little tour about the way others have said it. It's just kind of fun. For me, it took the roteness of do unto others as you would have them do unto you out of the golden rule. So when I say it in my own mind now, I think about the way that actually Confucius said it. Don't do anything that I wouldn't like either. The Buddhists say, may all beings be free from suffering. Indigenous peoples, Native Americans, through their oral traditions, have passed on the wisdom that we must live in harmony, for we are all related. This is wisdom. We call this wisdom because it's wise. We call it wisdom because it captures something about our common humanity that we need to put into practice. Now, one reads a lot these days about compassion fatigue. And people are saying, there is so much compassion fatigue. People can't care anymore. People can't do healthcare jobs. People can't stay in long-term care. They ask the question, is it possible to care too much? And I would like to suggest to you that there is no such thing as compassion fatigue. You can't be too kind. You can't care too much. But you can be too empathic. You can experience empathic distress. Now, why do I want you to sort of think about this distinction? Because I think when we talk about the Great Resignation, we talk about the Great Exit, we forget that a lot of people go into this field because they care enough. And we have stopped creating the conditions in which we allow that caring to emerge. And we've bought into a framework that says, oh, they're just all having burnout. They're just all having compassion fatigue. I don't think so. I think they're having empathic distress. And I want people to start playing with this idea and start thinking about the difference between empathy and compassion. Because if you think about it, you may appreciate that empathy is very self-focused. Oh, that hurts me so much. it hurts me so much to see people this upset. It hurts me. And when people talk about their empathic response, and I'm not saying this is wrong, I'm saying that it is a developmental step that can have a different conclusion. Because empathy, if you notice on this slide, goes in two directions. Empathy is a good thing, that capacity to feel, to take another's perspective, to stand in their shoes, to feel what they feel, but it can go into two directions. It can go into distress when it remains about how you feel in the face of this suffering. It leads to poor health on the part of caregivers. It leads to burnout. It leads to emotional withdrawal because none of us can stay in that place. You can't stay only in the suffering. But when you turn to contemplate relieving that suffering and the freedom from that suffering, and you know that your efforts are heading in the direction of the freedom, it changes your brain chemistry, it changes your perspective, and it changes your ability to take action. It allows you to approach, because now when you approach suffering, it is with the aim in mind of relieving it, not of being stuck in it. When you approach that suffering, it is with the other in mind, as well as yourself. And this, I think, is the insight actually that Darwin had. Darwin was very interested. He wrote several books about emotions. And he was very interested in this capacity that humans have to feel into the other. He didn't call it that, he called it sympathy. But he was really talking about empathy and that feeling into. And he said, the reason these pro-social behaviors evolve is that I can't take it anymore. I want you to feel better so I can too. That's kind of a paraphrase. I don't think that's exactly the way Darwin put it. But the evidence is really very strong and emerging that actually compassion leads to good health and no burnout. There are tremendous physical and psychological benefits to compassion. And we know now, thanks to things like PET scanners and MRIs, again, for those of you who like science, that when we are experiencing, and I can tell you how these studies are done, but when we are experiencing compassion or thinking about compassion or meditating on compassion, meditating on loving kindness, very different parts of our brain light up compared to when we are simply thinking about the suffering, our own or that of another. And again, the evidence is very clear that there's an inverse relationship between compassion and burnout. And our current situation over the last 10 years, 5 years, and definitely 2 years has allowed a lot of these studies to evolve. Compassion has been called an indefatigable wellspring of energy, of love, of action, of sustained energy. And I don't remember who said it, but I think they're right. Now, if compassion is such a great thing, why is it so hard, or why is it sometimes so absent? Well, there are a lot of barriers to compassion, and I think this is where we can really begin to think about the way we do this work in culture change. We got to start with the self. I think that there are barriers within us that prevent us from experiencing or showing compassion to ourselves. And I've listed some of these here for you. And I would say at the top of my list is this idea that people feel somehow that to be compassionate towards oneself or to need compassion or to want compassion is some kind of weakness. And there's a kind of a cultural vulnerability that we have. Many people feel like they're not deserving of compassion. Some people, quite frankly, are not kind to themselves, compassionate towards themselves, because they don't know about it. This is particularly true for women who are socialized to be kind to others. And I'm afraid that a lot of people grow up with and adopt, internalize a lot of very harsh self-criticism. That gets in the way of being compassionate towards oneself. It's also hard to receive compassion sometimes for others, and I think that it sometimes leaves us feeling a little vulnerable, and maybe, in the face of kindness, activates old and unresolved grief that all of us have about one thing or another. There was a very interesting study that was done in I'm not sure now if it were a monastery or a seminary, but it was someplace where people were studying their religious tradition to go and be priest, either through monkhood or through whatever the other kind of priests are. And so there were these seminarians, and they did this experiment with these seminarians, where they told one group of seminarians that they had to get to, let's say, chapel by a certain time, and that it was very important that they got there on time because they had a particular task to do that was going to take 5, 10 minutes, whatever it was. But the message they kept getting was, you better hurry. You don't have enough time, you got to get there. And to another group of seminarians, they said, I'd like to see you in the chapel later. The program or prayer service or whatever starts at a particular time. You have the same amount of time, but a very different message about it. You have about 10 minutes. And then on the pathway to where people were going to the chapel or the church for the activity, they had a person on the ground, okay, who appeared as if they had fallen and said either, I don't remember, in words or in behavior, help me, or words to that effect, or looked at the passing by seminarians, basically asking for help, taking a supplicant's pose, if you will. The seminarians, who had been told they didn't have enough time and they'd better hurry, passed that person by. Many said, I'm sorry, but kept right on going. The people who were told they had time stopped to see what the person needed. And it was such an interesting experiment for me because I have every confidence that those seminarians all wish to be kind, all wish to be helpful, see it as their mission, their role, their calling, and yet told by authority, told by supervisors, told by figures they looked up to. They didn't have time to do anything except get over to the chapel. That's what they did. There's a message for us in there. And the way we talk with direct care workers, with CNAs, about what they have time for and what they don't have time for. Sometimes I think a barrier to compassion for other people is that it feels so insurmountable. And it really feels as though like nothing we do makes a real difference, can't really make a difference. But we sure heard some inspiring words from Deke earlier, how that just isn't so. We can't afford to be indifferent. And we heard it in our forefathers and foremothers in the pioneer founding. We can't afford complacency. We can't afford the notion that there's nothing that we can do. But I do think that it's one of the barriers. I think particularly when we think about serving people who are living with dementia, that we also wonder how important compassion is, or behaving in this way, because we think that the difficult behavior, so-called, the challenging behavior, and what I call the behavioral expressions, are just symptoms. It's just the symptom of dementia, and therefore we can't do anything about it. And I gotta tell you, after writing a curriculum some years ago about person-centered dementia care, one of my happiest moments is when a CNA came up to me and said, thank you for that training. It feels good to be allowed to care again. It feels good to be allowed to care again. That was pretty powerful. So there are lots of barriers, you can read them. And I think that within our own cultures or organizations, just like we take the pulse on racism anti-racism, just like we take the pulse on ageism, just like we take the pulse on sexism, and the intersection of all of those, we need to take the pulse on our culture of compassion, and we need to identify within our cultures what the barriers are that exist. Now, I want to look at this issue of burnout in just a moment. And I also want to say that I think in my own, I'm a physician, and I think that in my own culture, medical culture, things have really changed very dramatically from the 40 years ago that I trained. I don't actually think that, that the problem is as much about the hierarchy or about the authority. I think it's really about the extent to which we have allowed business to become our model. I think it is the extent to which physicians and other healthcare providers see themselves as precisely that, providers of a commodity, of a service. We've stepped away, I think, from the notion of being a physician, nurse practitioner, a nurse, a healthcare professional of any kind. Stepped away from the notion that it's a calling, that it's a profession, that it's a service, and into the idea that it's a job and that we work for hospitals or we work for health systems. And in my belief is that that is the biggest contributor to what people are calling burnout. It's not, honestly, I don't think, long hours. It's not working hard. It's not even working short. It's working without a sense of true purpose. It's working without permission to care. And I think that the new ideas that are emerging about moral injury and moral distress are worth us taking a look at in long-term care as well. Moral distress is this idea that in your workplace or in your profession, you are seriously compromised in being able to do the job the way you think it ought to be done, and being able to deliver care the way you think it ought to be delivered, and feeling helpless in front of that. It's not a deficiency, it's not a diagnosis, it's not some kind of failing. It's not some kind of you're not resilient enough. I have a good friend who says, who works in a hospital setting in a state other than mine, and she said, if one more person tells me to do yoga at lunch, I'm gonna slug them. And who could blame her if she did? You know, in healthcare, we're trying to create this notion of super canaries. You know the reference to a canary in the coal mine, right? When you have your canaries dropping over, right and left, it means there's toxic gas in the environment. It doesn't mean you get another canary. It doesn't mean you build a better canary, okay? This to me is the problem. And I gotta tell you, I have to admit, I have been working during the pandemic on resilience and recovery. That was where I found my opportunity to serve, was in helping people be more resilient, helping people recover, helping people in this post-pandemic period. But along the way, I have realized that I have bought into the idea, not that there's something wrong with the people that I'm supporting, I don't think I ever bought into that, but I did buy into the idea that we could be just a little smarter, have just a little more self-care, to be able, no matter how many times they knock us down, to get back up. And the image that kept coming to my mind was of a toy I had as a child. It was a sort of clown thing. Maybe some of you remember it. It had like sand or something in the bottom, and you would hit it, and it would fall over, but it would bounce back up, and you'd hit it again, and you kept pounding it, seeing if you could make it stay down. Never stayed down. And that's the image that came to me in this resilience work, and this idea of trying to make super canaries. And I had to pause and say, there's too much toxic gas here. There's too much going wrong in the system. There's more that we need to look at. And I arrived at this notion about compassion when doing some work in long-term care with groups of residents, doing a resident support group basically, talking with them every week, and they were looking for something very different. Not just people who could take it all the time, but people who themselves felt cared about. The residents were so concerned about the staff who were taking care about them that they would try to make them feel a little lighter in their load. So I started thinking about this notion of buoyancy. And I replaced that super canary with a dragonfly. And I thought, you know, what compassion really allows us to do is to remain buoyant, to remain aloft and not aloof. It's not about stepping back, but it's about saying, where's my wellspring? What will allow me to remain buoyant and not just get up every time they knock me down? How can I stay actually standing so I can see what's going on? How can I stay upright? How can I stay aloft and not become aloof? Because this is the essence, I think, of compassion training and compassion work. It requires that our hearts break. It requires, though, that they break in a way where they break wide open so that we can better embrace our work. And it turns out that the cultivation of compassion is a hugely, hugely powerful antidote to burnout and to what I'm beginning to think of as even more important, this moral distress. So, I'd like to help you all become more buoyant. Not just resilient, but more buoyant. So I want to hit the reset button in your brain, and here's what I'd like to try to help you do. I'd like to help you tame that fear-threat center, this part of your brain, part of your endowment. It's a good one. There are threats. We have to pay attention to them. We want to be mindful of them. But once we got that signal, there's something wrong here, we want to be able to tame it, to dampen it, to work with it in a different way so that we can also wake up the better parts, or the, not better, the higher parts of our mind. We need to know about the threats, but we also need to recognize that there are many ways that we can respond to them. Now, whenever I tell people to breathe, my friend Lisa comes to mind, and I think, please don't punch me. I know that everybody's telling you to breathe, but I'm going to tell you why a deep breath is so important. The reason everybody who wants you to become more buoyant, or to be more resilient, or to take care of yourself starts with breathing is that our breath is the tool that we have to reset that part of our brain called the amygdala, which is our threat center, and to signal to our brain, relax, I've got this. And deep breathing really is nothing more than into your belly and out slowly. 3 times is all you need, under a minute, to reset your sympathetic nervous system. And when you reset your sympathetic nervous system and engage your parasympathetic, it's not that you're relaxed forever. It's that you sent a powerful signal to your brain that says, I got to move on from just being anxious or just being angry or just being afraid. I've got to move to action. I've got to name this so I can figure something out, and I have to do so in a way that allows me to have compassion. So the first thing you got to do, if you haven't learned it already, is learn to deep breathe. The other tool I'd like to tell you about was developed at Duke University, and this was well before the pandemic, when people noticed that a lot of hospitals were losing workers. And so Duke said, how are we going to promote the well-being of healthcare professionals? And so they did a lot of studies, and they have a great website. And one thing that emerged from their work was something called 3 good things. How many people have heard of it? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, great. The rest of you, here's what 3 good things are. At night before you go to bed, we are instructed to think about our day and to think about 3 good things that happen. Duke would have you write them down, dictate them in your phone, say them out loud, whatever works for you. But think of the day and think of 3 good things. And then you say to yourself, what role did I have in those good things coming about? Because what's important is to recognize that we do have some agency. We do have some control over our attitudes. We do have some ability to make some sense of and something better of the day. And then you say, I'm grateful for that good thing in my life. I am grateful. And then you name anybody else who had a hand in that good thing happening in your day. Now, there are many variations on what I've come to think of as gratitude practice. And gratitude practice really is the stopping and pausing and saying, I am grateful for. But it's not enough just to say I'm counting my blessings. I am grateful for so many things. And when I pause to think about them, I name them. And if another person is responsible for that thing I'm grateful for or that situation, I tell them. Because in doing all of that, I know that it is good for my brain, for one, and I know that it puts more like net kindness into the world. Do it your way, but do it. Why am I so keen on this? Because there's a whole lot of good science that gratitude is good for us. It improves our physical health, it improves our sleep, it improves our psychological health, it increases empathy, and improves our mental strength. And you can see the reference there on this study that's been replicated. So gratitude's good for you. And it also primes your pump, so to speak, for being able to act compassionately. And I think that's what we need. Now, compassion sometimes gets a bad rap, I think, because particularly, frankly, from women who feel as though they have been socialized to be nice. And so I found this great graphic from Kristen Neff, who tries to teach, again, women in particular, though men can certainly and need to learn this as well. But she said, the problem for a lot of people is that we think compassion is all about the tender side. And she says, when you think about compassion, think about Mother Bear. Think about a mother bear who cuddles and coddles and is tender towards her cub. But if a threat comes to that cub, she turns fierce. And we need both aspects of our human capacities, our fierceness and our tenderness, to really create the kind of caring force that we're talking about. Now, I've been at this a really long time, like many of you. And this, I mean culture change, trying to put more person-centeredness in. And as Dick pointed out in that wonderful slide, this is an industry that has been so regulated. And all of our regulations haven't gotten us to where we want to be. And I kind of think, and what I think is missing from the NASM report, is a focus on compassion. But it's not teaching people to be compassionate, it's getting out of their way so they can be. Give me permission, thank you. Give me permission to feel good about caring again. So it's not getting people to do it, it's allowing people to be it. And that's really my message. And this slide for me really captures the energies that I'm trying to impart. Your final skill to give you to try to allow you to exercise your own self-compassion is this thing called catch, check, change. Now, this is a technique from cognitive behavioral therapy. This is not therapy. This is not medical advice. But this is a little trick to try to keep those positive emotional centers of your brain primed. Catch, check, change goes like this. When you hear a negative thought or hear somebody else say something negative, you don't correct them. So just take your own thoughts. Nothing good ever happens to me. You catch it. Nothing good ever happens to me. You catch it. You say, you check it. Is that really true? Has not one good thing ever happened to me? And you go, no, okay, it's not true. One good thing happened once. Okay. You know, we all have our sad sack moments, right? We all have these times where we say, oh, everything goes wrong. No, it doesn't. Okay? And it turns out that it's really important for our brain that we catch these things and that we check them and we change them and say, okay, one good thing happened. Hey, some things go really right. Because the one thing that we can really always control is our attitude. And we have to create the conditions in which compassion can emerge. And this is a skill that I teach people everywhere. It's part of my recovery and resilience course from the pandemic. And I got to tell you, CNAs and management really like this one. Because we all know we do it, and we know that we're doing it particularly now when we're finding it so hard, many of us, or sometimes, not to become cynical and worn down. So catch it, check it, and change it. Loving kindness meditation is another idea that I'd like to share with you or suggest that you check out. And in the slides, which I'm not sure you have yet, but we'll get, there's a hyperlink to a particular meditation that I personally love. Loving kindness meditation is something Buddhists have been doing, and maybe some before them, for a long time. And loving kindness meditation is basically this notion that you say as kind of a mantra: may I be free from suffering. May I be happy and well. May I know compassion. May I be free from physical suffering. And you say it a few times, and you always direct that compassion towards yourself first, because it primes you to be compassionate towards others. May I be happy. May I be content. May I feel safe and secure. We could even run through and say, may I experience all the domains of well-being. Okay? However you say it. But it's kind of a mantra where you direct that compassion towards yourself. And then the next phase of it is that you say, may my spouse be free from suffering. May my spouse know physical health. May my spouse, or I say spouse because that's the person closest to me whom I love. But you pick somebody who it's easy to have compassion for. And you kind of run through all those steps. And you keep moving it out. This particular loving kindness meditation lasts about 10 minutes. And you don't have to do it as a regular thing, but you might be interested in checking it out because, again, it activates the highest parts of our brain, the so-called prefrontal cortex, the part from which wisdom arises, from which compassion arises. And that's the part of our brain that is so missing us as we live in threat mode, as we live with so much fear and uncertainty and we can't get out of it, and our body politic is trying to keep us there. We got to say so long to it and move into those zones that will work better for us. Our residents are counting on us to do this. Our residents know from suffering. They know from pain and loneliness and boredom and helplessness. They know from loss. They know from feeling unloved. And if you ask them what they'd like us to do about it, because I ask them every time I go in with my group, what would help? Yeah, I know, they're all working short-staffed. Yeah, I know. Groups have been canceled. Yeah, I know. What would help? You know what would help is if somebody would just see me. If somebody would just say hello and smile and be kind. And I know people are out straight. So what I'm trying to figure out with you today is how to create those conditions that will allow people to feel good about caring again. Because when you smile, and somebody smiles back at you, as this woman often does to me when I look out at you, you feel good. It's going to be true for you. It's going to be true for the residents. So I listen to the residents' voices. And the other thing that they tell me is that they wish somebody would ask them to help out. And they don't mean serve trays. They mean hold memorial services for people they've lost during COVID. They want to help, they want to be engaged, they want opportunities to exercise compassion themselves, and they don't find that anyone is interested in what they have to contribute. When you smile, smile like you mean it, is what they say. When you want to get to know me, act like you really do care. And if you've forgotten my name, that's okay, ask me for it. But see me, hear me, feel me, understand me. This takes no resources, but it does take creating the conditions when people feel like they can do it again. And that does mean that we have to pay really, really close attention to how we are taking care of our workforce. Families also are key to helping us cultivate compassion. And I just need to do a time check because I forgot to look at my clock. Okay, I got time. And I'm going to ask you to join me in a little guided imagery, just a little thought experiment, so to speak, to demonstrate for you what I mean by this, families being key to helping us cultivate compassion in ourselves, in them, in the residents, in each other, basically in our communities. And so what I'd like you to do, if you're comfortable, is to close your eyes. And I'd like you to imagine that you are moving in to your facility, or a facility that you most recently worked in. And I want you to picture yourself coming in that very first day. Start wherever you like. Driving up in front of your community, in front of your home, in front of the house. I want you to picture yourself going to the front door for the first time. Your family's with you. You've agreed to move in. You're not happy about it, but you've agreed. You're not there involuntarily. You've agreed. How are you feeling as you walk up to that front door? Apprehensive, expectant, happy, a little relieved, angry? Any number of feelings, and probably all of them are present. There's not a right one or a wrong one. Just how are you feeling in that moment that you walk up to the door? Now open the door and walk in. What's the first thing you see in your community? Is there anybody to say hello and welcome? Is there anybody who seems glad to see you? Or do you feel like, everybody's really busy and they're not glad to see you at all? They smile, they say welcome, but you can see they don't mean it. You can see that they're busy, they're working too hard. They wish they didn't have to do a new admission. Who shows you to your room? What's your room look like? Is it your own room? Do you have a private room? Do you have a roommate? Does anybody introduce you to your roommate? Is your roommate there? What kind of bed do you have? Do you have a place for your things? Have you arrived at mealtime? Has anybody come and introduced themselves, your next door neighbor? What is that first moment like of joining your community? And for the family who accompanies you, what is their first moment like? We need to pay really close attention to these human details, so to speak. We need to invite other residents to help us with this welcome wagon kind of task of saying, I see you just moved in here today, or are you new here, or welcome, or can I show you the dining room, or whatever it is. Moving in is the first moment that we have to do unto others as we wish them to do unto each other. And you can open your eyes. We want to invite, basically, everybody who's a member of our community to play by the golden rules. Not just playing by the regulatory rules. We know plenty about that. But let's see how we can get the golden rule to be the keystone of our culture. Compassion, the keystone of our culture. I think you do it by modeling it. There's a lot of ways to teach it, and if you're interested, we can look at some of those resources. You can teach people to be more compassionate. In fact, there's something called the Compassion Project that somebody's putting in all the grade schools, or in many. I think they're like, I don't know how many now, hundreds of elementary schools that have signed up for the Compassion Project. So we know, there are people who know that this is something we need to do a little bit of work on. Not because we don't have it, but because we've gotten in the way of it. And so I would like us to be able to make this the cornerstone and invite everybody, residents, families, staff, management, and owners, to start playing by the golden rule. Now, if you have your phones, I would ask you to take them out and take the poll that I've put in there for you, because I'm really curious as to whether or not any of the skills or any of the ideas that I've offered you about things that you might try to tame your fears, tame the uncertainty, and wake up compassion. Has everybody found it? It's in that WHOVA poll. And I don't know, whoops. I think there's supposed to be a way that shows the results, but I don't actually have my phone up. Oh yeah, I do. I have my phone right here. And let's see. Oh, I didn't bring my glasses up here. Oh, I can't see how it's going. Now, I could run over there, but I've only got 4 minutes, so. What? It's there. Okay, so people are answering it, and you can see for yourself which of these skills that some of you are going to try. And I'll just ask you to do one. And maybe some of them you're already doing. But remember, the idea of this is not for you to learn compassion. You know that. This is to try to create the conditions in you that you can then figure out how to create it in your cultures. This is what the Dalai Lama says every day he gets up. As soon as I wake up, he says, I remind myself how important it is to be kind. I remind myself of the importance of kindness and compassion. And then my next step is I set my intention for this day to have purpose and meaning. And for the Dalai Lama, and I suspect for many, many, many of us, a good day, a meaningful day, a day of joy and purpose is one in which we are permitted to serve, in which we do more good than harm. And he says, you know, if I can't do that, at least, let me not hurt anyone. Let me not do to somebody else what, if it were done to me, I wouldn't like. Now, you don't need to say this morning meditation, but it will help you get on the right track. And so I'll close with this also from the Dalai Lama, who says, if you want to be happy, if you want others to be happy, the people you serve, practice compassion. And if you want to be happy, you practice compassion. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. How'd I do? You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Comments or questions? Yes. Do we have time for one? I think we have time for one or two.
I just wanted to thank you for this. This has really been inspiring. When I was training for my CNA license, my instructor during a practicum, I went out and was talking about a resident that I was really worried about. And she said, Lauren, you're going to make a great CNA, but to go the distance, you have to take your heart out of it. And that is, it just, chilled me, and I don't believe that, but I understand what she was talking about, with burnout. And so what I learned here today is keeping myself centered and healthy so that I can take the highs and lows of, the hard work that CNA requires. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. They say when you get older, you can always learn something new. And what I knew was compassion. When I went into the nursing home, I didn't understand the other residents, the condition they were in, and why they were like that. And then within 2 weeks, I realized that the staff at Shadle Village are the most compassionate people you could wish to meet. They stroke their hair, they whisper in their ear, and they are the kindest people. And every day now, I like to give a little compassion myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and let's hear it for Schlegel Village. What an endorsement that is, kind and compassion.
One more, Susan.
One more, okay.
Bear with me, though. Hard to run.
Hello, I just wanted to say that this presentation was greatly needed. People are taught to be very sympathetic, but they don't know the difference between have sympathy, compassion, and how they all relate. They have to be together. And one other question, will the slides be available?
Yes, and I'm sorry they weren't in
That's okay.
advance, but they will be.
They will actually be available on the app, both Susan slides and Deke slides.
Yes. Yeah, this, I can't tell you how many CNAs I've heard this from when we have this kind of conversation about, ever since that person said, thanks for letting me care again, I've just been so inspired about how much heart people bring to the work. But I can't tell you how many times I've heard what you were told. If you want to survive in this job, you got to take your heart out. And I say, no, actually, that was really bad advice. You got to keep your heart in. Because it's keeping the heart in that prevents the moral distress. And if you prevent the moral distress, you prevent the burnout. So we got to start teaching those instructors this little more nuanced way of protecting your heart and using your heart. But I'm glad that you decided to stay in the field and decided to stay all in. Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Susan Wehry. And I could have heard you for another hour or so whatever. Thank you so much, Susan. So before I introduce our last 15-minute speaker of this morning, Jack York, I have a few announcements, and then we will take our break for lunch. Number one, as I said, all of the slides that you have seen today will be available on the app. We will load those this afternoon, so you will be able to have those. I encourage you over the 90-minute break that we have during lunch to please connect with our Solution and Experience Center partners. They really do want to show you what they have to offer and really hear from you what some of your challenges are and see if they have some solutions for you. We also have some wonderful book readings. If you go to the bookstore, there's actually a list of the book readings, and you can attend some of those as well. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Joan, I see you back there, but I don't think so. So I also want to say we're having concurrent sessions all afternoon. Please enjoy those sessions. And then we'll have concurrent sessions again tomorrow morning. So we'll be gathering together, all of us, tomorrow afternoon. So as I said, for some of you may have heard during the welcome session, Pioneer Network has always had a great party. And one of the hosts of the great party is Jack York, who you're going to be hearing from. Jack is also going to talk about his new adventure, and it's called Tailgate. Many of you know him as the founder of IN2L, and yes, he is still associated with IN2L, but he has a very exciting thing he wants to talk with you about. And I just want to thank Jack, because Jack has been a great supporter of Pioneer Network. He is a former board member, and Tailgate, Select Rehab, and IN2L are sponsoring our Night at the Ball game tomorrow night. And so Jack has more info about that. And Jack, your 15 minutes starts now.
All right. You know, Penny, I think you should listen to Susan's talk, because when she talked about the compassionate way to tell somebody a point, I was berated that would I stay on 15 minutes. So that is true. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about a couple things, but the main thing I'm talking about, and many of you know me very well, but I'm gonna talk about the biggest love affair that I've had since we started IN2L 23 years ago. But go ahead to I guess we can click it here. There's let me get back. My love affair with the Pioneer Network, and my wife and my lover in this whole journey, and Dan would be okay with me saying that, is Rosemary. The 20 years ago, we met here in Denver. I think it was a Leading Age conference, and Rosemary, I didn't know anything. I said in front of a group of people that these residents that I saw, they were shriveled up. Not a really good phrase to use in this world of culture change. But you personally, Rosemary, and there's so many people here in this room, and you always get in trouble when you start saying names because you forget people. But I got to say Juliet Holt, I got to say Carrie, you got to say Jeff Jarepker, got to say Alan Brown, just people that guided this idea we had, that my brother, and that's my brother Tom, I'm holding a picture of my brother Tom, who he died 3 years into the journey, and we didn't know what we were doing. All we knew was that people deserved their activity and their therapy programming deserved to be better. And you guys helped us figure that out. And we have wound up having this incredible 23-year journey that's impacted thousands of lives. This is how we started. There's me with dark hair. And I love that lady in the front row, sound asleep. But that's what made it happen. That was our first resident. I hope Jill's here somewhere. That's a Christian Living Communities. I apologize for the ergonomics. We figured it out. Betty Shaw. Betty Shaw was our very first resident that ever used our technology. It was just fascinating, the things that we learned. My son, Nathan, there he is at about 9 years old. He'll be at the baseball game tomorrow night at 28. His journey through this whole experience, we had him doing, he was doing the tech support. He spoke. I won't show this whole clip. It's going to take too long. But there's the greatest clip of him speaking. Well, go ahead and get started. I won't do the whole thing. But I know I got to stick to my time, Penny. Don't worry.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nathan York, and my call to action was in the form of a 108-year-old woman named Mamie Legg. When I was 7 or 8 years old, my dad decided to have me start coming out to nursing homes to, meet some of the residents. And the first place I went to was a place in Colorado called the Christian Living Campus. And we thought it would be really fun if I met the oldest lady that they had there. And her name was Mamie Legg, and she was 108 years old. When I first met Mamie, it was pretty weird. She was pretty old, that's for sure. And She was blind, deaf in one ear, and whenever I said something, I had to yell pretty loud. And I didn't think that she understood anything that I said. My dad taught me how to send little audio emails through his company, It's Never Too Late. And I would send a message to her probably every week. And whenever I went to the nursing home, she would remember what I said. And I was completely surprised. And she would also send me back some pretty cool messages, too. Yeah. As the months and years went by, I got to know Mamie pretty well. She taught me a lot about God and about school. And she also taught me how to love my little sister when she wasn't easy to love. She also taught me about what it was like growing up in the early 1900s. She was born in 1894. And she taught me a lot. She was really smart. She died in June of 2005, but it happened while I was out of school, so I could see her almost every single day for the last 2 weeks of her life. On the day before she died, my brother played Amazing Grace on the violin for her. She wasn't awake, but I know that she heard it. It was her favorite song. So now I'm 14 years old, and that experience has taught me a lot. Not only am I not afraid of nursing homes anymore, but I actually feel like a better person. And right now in Colorado, I'm trying to go to nursing homes and teach some of the residents how to do the flight simulators stuff. Yeah. And well, the experience has really changed my life, and I'm very glad for the chance to have met Mamie. I'm very honored to have met her. Thank you. Hi, everybody.
And being the huckster that I am, we exploited the heck out of Nathan speaking. That's him at a fundraising event. He did about 100, probably about 50 different fundraising events over the years, and was very successful. But and I was talking to Maggie about this last night, that it's just this whole experience for me, and I'm sure it's true for you guys at the table, it's just a walk through our lives. It's a walk through the last 20 years. And I think in the midst of always trying to get better, hopefully you guys are able to pat yourselves on the back a little bit. Yeah, you've done a lot. And Penny's, and we've done so many things. The wine taste, the wine tasting remotely. For some reason, Penny let me play a guitar doing Springsteen and the Rolling Stones, and I thought I was really good when I was on stage, and somebody filmed it. My God, it was the worst performance ever. But we were buying everybody drinks, so they all clapped. That's kind of how that all works. There's Nathan. Nathan was dressed up as Bill Clinton's security guard in the Little Rock conference. And you guys embraced Francis from Cameroon as doing one of the keynote speeches. We have raised, in 7 years, we've raised $500,000 for water projects, for farming projects, and now we're taking on a school. And you guys embraced him. A lot of that happened because of him having the visibility at the conference many, many years ago. That's the senior center built in my mom's name, the Dorothy York Senior Center in the middle of Cameroon. And the funds for that, a lot of it came from people that we met through this world. So it's so powerful for me. And IN2L has been just a labor of love. And the irony of what's happening, irony might not be the right word, but I think that what is so cool, and I hope Susan's here somewhere too, but what's gone on with IN2L, and we were acquired by a private equity company, Vista Equity, doing all kinds of things to help invest in the company. We partnered with LifeLoop. It's change, and it scares people a little bit, and it's different. And it's so analogous to what's going on between the pioneer world, the greenhouse world. It's going to kick ass. It is totally going to kick ass. And so it's really a cool thing to see these things happen and where that all goes. So anyway, I'm kind of moving towards the third chapter of my life, which I'll talk about in 6 minutes and 15 seconds, Penny. that 4 years ago, right before COVID, I turned 60 and our company turned 20. And so we invented this thing called the 60-20 tour. And I had spent my whole 20-year career not ignoring residents, not being rude to residents, but I was trying to get to the EDs. We were trying to sell IN2L. 60-20 was all about the residents, the elders, their stories, and it was life-changing for me. I'm gonna show just 3 or 4 really quick clips of kind of what happened. We turned it into carpool karaoke. It's incredible the content that we had. Here's just a couple of snapshot examples.
I have never been married.
Oh, you've never been married? All right, then
I am an unclaimed treasure.
Oh. Let's go. And so Juliet's got to be out here somewhere. Juliet Holt. This is, you guys look, you spend all this money trying to find marketing stories and clips. Lean on your residents living with dementia. They can be your best marketing tools. Listen to this lady at a Brookdale community.
Serve all and any on one giant campus.
And we have cloth napkins.
And we have cloth napkins.
And we have cloth napkins. And so you have all these whimsical things. And where is Carrie? Carrie's out here somewhere. This was so emotional. I was able to ride with an angel.
No, I'm just a simple sister who loves the Lord and who loves people very much. And I'm only 96. I'm going to be 97 next week. And I'm not, nuns never retire. I wrote an article to that effect. Nuns never retire.
So I don't know, ladies, if you would agree with that nuns never retire. But she was an angel, and she was gone less than 2 weeks after that video. And it was sad, but it was so cool to be able to have her life story captured there. I mean, it was really, really powerful. And the last clip I'll show, this is really in honor of Kim. Is Kim from Georgia here somewhere? Oh, are you there? Is that Kim? So Kim, this clip is dedicated to you. So everybody be real quiet and listen to, I'm asking her, what gives her joy? Keeps you energized? What gives you joy?
Men.
Men. So what that has led to is what we're calling tailgate, a combination of telling stories and a tailgate party. It's a 42-foot trailer. We are building this huge recording studio inside. There's a whole IN2L component to it. There's a speakeasy lounge in the front that we're calling the press box. And we're starting to roll in September. We're going to officially launch at Leading Age here in Denver in October. And our first event, and this is life going full circle, that lady that I showed you at the very beginning, Betty Shaw, that was at Christian Living, then it was called Christian Living Campus, Christian Living Communities. We're doing our first event on August 18th at the Christian Living Communities down in Denver. And it's awesome what we're going to do. And that's a combination of where it's going to be a tailgate party. Everything from hula hoops and photo booths, old school stuff. And I love the idea of like 4 90-year-old men flying drones. It's going to be this whole event when we show up that's all about changing the whole point, this is the whole perception of aging. We are, another shout out to Mr. Jones, Mr. Nathan Jones of Dash Media. He's going to be our social media partner. That guy, I can never figure out social media, and Nathan's got it nailed. Inside this recording studio, we're going to be getting clips of why this is a cool community to live in and why this is a cool community to work in. We have our brand new employee, and his name is Tom Brady, baby. We are bringing Tom Brady to your community. Tom is right there. He's our videographer. And so we'll be getting all this content, getting it to Nathan. He's going to turn it into Instagram, TikTok, all these different clips that are just going to elevate the profession of senior living, the elders living in it, and the staff living in it. And the last thing we're doing is a reality TV show. We're going to be very selective, but where you see that thing cyclone, it's all getting wrapped. It all looks totally different. But where that cyclone is, it's a stage that drops down. And we're going to do a reality TV show partnering with Saltbox TV. And the way it's going to work is we're going to only do one a month, very specific. We're going to find an elder that is a humble person that's changed lives. Maybe it's a teacher. Maybe it's a cop. Maybe it's a librarian. I'm going to be interviewing her in the trailer, and without him or her having any idea, you drop out. They'll walk outside of the trailer, and let's say it's a teacher. There's 100 of their students that are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. Look at what you have done in your life, and I'm just fascinated. I'm fascinated and I'm grateful. I mean, I'm grateful. I can't even convey it. Yeah, so 2 seconds, 1 second. Just in all sincerity, it's been an honor to have so many of you helped IN2L become the company that's become. A tailgate is somewhat of a gratitude to give back to these elders and the staff that have made the company what it is. So anyway, thanks for the 50 minutes. I'm 30 seconds over, Penny. That's much better than you would have thought of. We're doing a big-ass baseball game. Go out, if you've signed up for tickets, Dale, my hero, Dale for 15 years is out there, a booth. It's a little table right by the bookstore, and you can get your tickets there. We've got about 15 or 20 extra. If you want to get them now, and the game's at 6:40 tomorrow night. It's a rooftop bar, and you get the ticket and $20 of beer, which is probably like a half beer, the way what stuff costs. But and then afterwards, we're going to have maybe a special party with Lance. Is Lance in here? Coyote Ugly, baby. Coyote Ugly at midnight. We'll see you there. Thank you very much, Penny.